Welcome to the Nonprofit Exchange. Stories, tools, and wisdom shared by leaders for leaders to help you raise the bar on your own excellence and release the potential inside of you. Now, here's today's show. This is the Nonprofit Exchange. Welcome. My name is Hugh Ballou. I'm the founder and president of Center Vision Leadership Foundation. It's the synergy that leaders create because we're very clear about the vision. So we build that synergy as people rally around that vision. Today on the Nonprofit Exchange, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller, an international best-selling author, TEDx speaker, leadership coach, and expert on emotional intelligence. You may have seen the EQ letters. And empathy and leadership. Melissa is the founder of EQ via Empathy, where she helps leaders transform culture and performance by teaching empathy as a practical, actionable leadership skill grounded in research and real world application. Her journey from musician and professor to empathy advocate shapes her belief that leaders must understand people first in order to lead them well. Oh, we resonate, Melissa. She's author of The Emphatic Leader and host of the Emphatic Leader podcast. So, Melissa, your background spans music, academia, and leadership development. What first drew you to empathy as a leadership discipline? And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited to be here with you and your audience, Hugh. I really appreciate it. The thing about empathy is it's not something you start out in undergrad and you go, I'm going to study empathy. It was something that kind of came to me gradually. I was a musician. I was a musician for a long time. I played French horn. I got to tour places. I got to play with people like Ray Charles and Mannheim Steamroller and Manhattan Transfer. And I mean, it was fantastic. I loved everything about it. But the thing is I also really love food, shelter, and clothing. And sometimes being a gigging musician, those things are not real stable. So I went and got my first doctorate and went to become a professor, which is also a big deal. I mean, if you think about how many French horn professors do you know? Probably none. Most people don't. So to actually land that job was, for me, a really big deal. But unfortunately, within the first term there, I was assaulted by one of my colleagues. And then things got worse because I could not get people to listen. My chair didn't want to know, his boss didn't want to know, HR didn't want to know, the other people in the system, they were more concerned about keeping the status quo, and they missed that human connection because it didn't matter to them. And unfortunately, after not getting tenure, spoiler alert, they didn't want me there. I eventually had to leave, and then COVID happened and I had to leave music altogether, which was, I mean, that's all I'd ever done. So I didn't really know what else to do. But at that time, my husband and I started picking up some consulting stuff in healthcare, and I was doing some other work, and we kept running into this same thing where people in leadership position just didn't seem to connect with their people one on one, and they were losing profit and productivity and innovation because of it. And I just kept coming back to this and going, well, what is the deal? And it started to slowly dawn on me that it was this empathy idea. It was this human to human connection. There was a real problem with perspective taking. And I just kind of kept digging into this. It's like my brain just wouldn't let it go. So I said, okay, I'm going to go study this. I'm going to go figure this out, or I'm going to figure this out as much as anybody's going to. And I started my second doctorate in interdisciplinary leadership. My dissertation, I'm working on it right now, is on empathy and leadership. And I want to be the person who can figure this out because I think it's that important.
Oh, my goodness. That is key. My wife was also a French horn player. She's a conductor like I am, so we spent a career in music. So it's a very
Right?
unique culture, good and bad.
Yeah.
So there's some myths about the term empathy.
Oh,
There's so many of them. Like everything we do in nonprofits, we come in with these misconceptions. So, what are some of those specifically about empathy? And, how does it relate to this leadership track that you champion?
The biggest one is this idea that empathy is feeling. There's this thing floating around out there that it's I feel what you feel. And that's part of it, but there are 43 different definitions and kinds of empathy. The I feel what you feel or emotional empathy is only one. So as leaders, if that's all they see empathy as, they are missing the opportunity to be able to do so much more with it. Empathy isn't about feeling. It's about taking the perspective of the other to create understanding.
43 definitions. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you to define empathy. We'd be here all day. So,
But they
so,
all end up with perspective taking. They all fall under that umbrella.
wow, wow. So let's dig deeper. How do these myths create barriers so that we don't think empathy is important? Especially, you're going to talk about self-empathy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is because people have this misconception of what it is. They, first of all, don't understand if they're using it or not. And second, if they think they are using it, don't know if they're being effective or not. One of the main things I run into with leaders is they don't want to use it because they're like, oh, it's going to make me soft and look like a pushover and, like I'm just rolling over for everybody. And it's like, no, no, if you are in an organization, profit, nonprofit, academic, whatever, and you are dealing with people, which I hate to say it, most organizations do on some level or another, even if it's simply with customers, you have got to be able to take their perspective to understand them and know what they want and what they need and how to make this organization run the most efficiently as possible. So to miss that cue that this is about perspective taking and it's not about being soft and fluffy and puppies and rainbows is a huge opportunity lost.
So EQ, it's theory, but really, I'm assuming, let me let you define, you're connecting the dots to where this is not really fluff, it's not theory, it's a way to be practical. So there's a practical application that you can see tangible benefits. So our title, by the way, I got to read it so I can remember it. Our title that you gave me for today is Empathy is a Soft Skill with Hard Results. So
Yeah.
connect the dots. It's not just theory, right?
No, it's not theory, and not at all. So there was a survey done by Ernst and Young, big four, international consulting firm. Everybody knows who they are. And this was done in 2021 in the wake of the COVID pandemic moving into the Great Resignation. And what they wanted to know was how does empathy actually affect these organizations? Because the problem with COVID is all of a sudden these organizations had to have empathy because they had to understand the perspective of their people and what people were going through and what was going on. So all of a sudden their people are like, hey, they can understand my perspective. They do have empathy. And when we came back out of that and everybody was like, you have to return to work. It has to be like this. We don't care about, what you're doing anymore. People were like, all right, then I'm leaving. I don't want to deal with this. Well, according to this survey and the people that they surveyed, the organizations that were able to leverage empathy effectively were able to increase productivity by 87%, innovation by 86%, and profit by 84%. And that's not my opinion. Those are the facts that they came up with.
Hmm. Facts are so helpful.
They get in the way sometimes, but yes.
They tell us things maybe we don't want to hear.
Yes.
I like Edward de Bono had wrote a lot of books on thinking skills, and he said data is very important in making decisions.
Yes.
So, if in the area of emotional intelligence, empathy, EQ, nonprofit leadership, so distinguish empathy from other aspects of emotional intelligence.
Sure. And this is a fantastic question and one where I kind of differ from traditional logic on it. Because if you go back to Daniel Goleman's book, the one that was published in 95, how EQ is more important than IQ, he had 5 or 6 different, basically, emotional intelligence buckets. And there was, skills and communication and empathy and some others, but empathy was one of these. I actually think empathy has to come first. So if you're looking at emotional intelligence as a tool bag, right? And you've got these tools, you've got communication and motivation and your ability to work with people, and you've got hammers and saws and chisels and screwdrivers in here, right? You have to have empathy first to be able to take the perspective and understand your people. Because if you don't do that first, you don't know when you're reaching into that tool bag whether you're going in for a hammer or a left-handed chisel. And I think this is why emotional intelligence hasn't worked as well as it could.
It's a dynamic space, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
all those things work together.
Yes.
And we tend to think of IQ in simple terms like IQ test is memory comprehension, when Guilford, the structure of intellect, is all those other factors, problem solving, creative thinking, there's many aspects of even IQ.
Yeah.
But so understanding this, bring it down to a basic level. I'm a person running a local charity, and there's just a lot of things going on with my people, and I don't get it. My board's not following through. So how does all of this help me deal with the real life situations I have with people?
If you can understand what's happening through their perspective, and by they, it doesn't necessarily mean a singular person, it could be a group. What's the perspective of the board? What's the perspective of the customer? Then you can actually start to put your plans in place that are going to encourage these other people to go with you rather than just like, I'm going to put this in place and I'm going to throw that in place and this is what's going to happen, and having people know I'm not doing that. No, that's not what I really want to do. And I don't really feel I'm wanted, or that I'm part of this organization, or that sort of thing. And I think this is where being able to use more than one kind of empathy becomes very important. And I actually talk about three in particular. So I talk about emotional empathy, which is the I feel what you feel kind of empathy. I talk about cognitive empathy, which means I logically understand how you feel, where you're coming from, what your situation is, but I don't feel anything. I just logically understand it. And then there's self empathy, which is actually being able to dig in and understand why you do the things you do, how you react the way you do. It helps to grow with self awareness, all of that sort of thing, because you can't give what you haven't got. So if you don't have empathy for yourself, how can you possibly be expected to have it for anybody else?
When the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself first.
Yes. Drop the mic. Yes.
So I served in small to mega churches for 40 years as music director. And the one of the higher burnouts is with pastors who also avoid conflict, but in this area of so they're expected to be the pastor, but also the administrator in some smaller situations. So and even those running a small nonprofit. So churches are in fact a nonprofit. So it's a business model that's a lot harder than a business. So you've got all these charitable people doing good work that are mostly volunteers. Some are paid staff. So there's a tension between accountability and how you value people. So we think sometimes we can't have empathy and correct people, or even 40 years I had to fire a lot of volunteers. Mostly they were happy because it didn't fit.
Yes.
But you take a chance, it's not working, everybody knows it, so let's deal with it. So there's a tension between the accountability that we're responsible for and caring for people. So how do you balance those?
Well, first of all, having empathy does not mean you don't have boundaries. If you're running an organization, you've got to have boundaries, because that organization is what needs to come first. Without the organization, nobody's involved with it. And that shows a severe lack of empathy for the entire group. The other thing is like the example that you gave where some people had to be let go. I think that is empathy, because you're wanting that person to be able to do better and go farther and be happy in what they're doing. And if they're having that big of a problem and it's that bad of a fit, they're not happy either. So you're actually allowing them to be able to grow into the best possible version of themselves that they can. I was working with a director and he had to let someone go too. And he was expecting a huge confrontation and a blowout and, the usual stuff. But when he actually sat down with this person, was like, "You're not happy here." And this person was like, "No, I'm overwhelmed. I don't like the work I'm doing. And I would really rather be closer to my house." And they sat down. They worked on his resume a little bit, and he said, "This is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I might not have known it in the moment, but you actually did me a huge favor by taking my perspective and understanding." I mean, he didn't put it like that, but taking my perspective, understanding I'm as miserable here as I could be, and I'm making everybody else miserable with the process, and helping me move into a position that's going to be better for everybody.
Well, in Vision and my work, I teach that leadership is fundamentally about relationships.
Yes.
And that's the track that you're on.
Yeah.
So we set the bar for the culture. So talk for a minute about we're defining the culture with our behavior. So as we want to be liked, I think it's better to be respected and trusted. So how do we show up? We sometimes you talked about boundaries. I call them guiding principles as well. Here's how we make decisions for the benefit of the organization. So
Yeah.
for somebody that, and I have to fight with this myself. I want people to like me. So you know, that's a problem. I need to make the right decision on the right principle. So how do we
Yes.
balance the self-care and the empathy when we're in those tough situations dealing with volunteers, boards, staff, stakeholders, all of those. So it goes outside of just the people in the organization, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, with people, it always is. It always does. It always ripples out in ways that you don't even know. So I think for me, with what I teach and what I talk about, what I'm hearing is about the difference between being nice and being kind.
Mm.
you know, because nice is a social construct. Nice is what we do to get along in society. It's the way we lubricate our society so that everybody's comfortable and everybody's happy and everything is smooth. But it's not necessarily kind. You're not necessarily giving what's best for the other person, giving what's best for yourself, giving what's best for the organization. Empathy is always, always kind, but it's not always nice.
That's a really great distinction. It's taken me 79 years to learn the fine definition of a lot of words, a whole lot of words. It's different than what I assumed in my past. So, Melissa, you have a book that's just out, a best-selling book. You have it handy? Can you tell us about the book and what's in there?
I do. It's called The Empathic Leader. It's trying to keep the glare off it there. That's what I get for having a shiny cover. But it's colorful. I like colors. I guess, I mean, you can probably tell. And it's The Empathic Leader: How EQ via Empathy Transforms Leadership for Better Profit, Productivity, and Innovation. And really, I spend a lot of time in the book talking about empathy, what it is. I have most of a chapter on what it isn't, because we do have so many myths out there. Red flags and beige flags of people that have empathy or maybe people that don't. And I think the most important thing about the book is that even though it is geared towards leaders, it's not very long because I want people to be able to have time to read it, and leaders tend to be very busy. There's stuff in here that anybody can use, like the self empathy idea, the distinction between cognitive and emotional empathy, because we have to be able to lead ourselves before we can lead anybody else. So, this book is kind of my first one. My next book is going to be more geared towards all of us in society and what we can do for more empathy and being able to actually create a more empathetic culture. But this book in particular, it is geared towards leaders, but there's stuff in there that anyone could pick up just to lead themselves.
Well, in a culture, we're all leaders at different levels, aren't we?
Yes, we are,
In
whether
any
we want
culture.
to or not.
Yeah, we show up. That's the first. So, give us the title and subtitle again. That went by pretty fast.
It's The Empathic Leader: How EQ via Empathy Transforms Leadership for Better Profit, Productivity, and Innovation.
That's a mouthful. I wanted to hear it again.
That's okay.
So, two-part question. What's different about that leadership book and other leadership books, and what's different about that book and other books about EQ or empathy?
So, from other leadership books, it actually talks about empathy as a skill. It doesn't talk about this woo-woo thing that's just a feeling. This is an actionable skill that drives hard results, and that's how I approach it. That's the research backs that up. And the way it's different from other emotional intelligence books is that approach of EQ via empathy, emotional intelligence through the lens of empathy. Because I really do believe that that could be why we don't get the results out of emotional intelligence that we could.
We don't get what we could out of it.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. So when people criticize us, which never happens, but I'm making this up. People criticize us for taking this track. Oh, you just too, because they don't understand it. In having some background in sales, when people have an objection or criticism, it's really a request for information. So sometimes when people are picking on us about, well, this is woo-woo stuff, we need to get down to real work. Yeah, how do you respond to some people criticizing us? If we want to take this track and we're afraid of criticism, give us some ideas of how we can inform people of how important this is.
Some of the leaders that I've worked with have been some of the hardest, most data driven, results oriented people you could imagine. I mean, definitely not fluffy people, not touchy-feely at all. But by being able to bring empathy in, especially cognitive empathy, which again is something that most people haven't considered, much less that it's a learnable skill, they actually have been able to drive profit, productivity, and innovation and see it in the bottom line. So to dismiss empathy just because, well, it's fluffy and it's puppies and rainbows. Well, yeah, okay, it is according to a lot of the myths are out there, but let's start with a real definition and see if maybe it's a lot closer to what you think could actually drive business and create better systems.
Now, any skill or any behavior in excess can be a negative.
Oh, sure. Drinking
It's
too much water is negative.
right, right. So people think, oh, you got too much empathy for somebody. Well, maybe, but that's no reason not to have empathy, is it?
No, not at all. Moderation in all things, including moderation.
So people want to find you, and I'm going to find your website again. I had it queued up. So your website, it's got a kind of a tricky name. Can you tell people where your website is, how they find it?
Sure. It's EQ via, and that's V as in Victor, IA, empathy.com. So it's in on the cover of the book as well.
And it will be on the page for this interview. And by the way, if people, you sent us, we went through a lot of data really quickly. So don't worry, listeners, audience, there's a transcript on the page. All these great ideas are there in writing. You can look at the video, listen to the recording, and find the transcript. So, Melissa, when people go to your website, what will they find?
Well, they're going to see really encapsulated what I do because I'm really on a mission. I want this understanding of what empathy really is and how we can use it to be out there. So you'll find my book there. You can buy the book. You'll see my TEDx talk, which as of today, in 2 months, we're at about 84,000 views, which is fantastic. Yeah, there it is. That's my TEDx talk. You'll also find some of the other talks that I've done at like Cambridge and Oxford and Columbia University. And there's a contact form there. So if you want to contact me, I do coaching. That's part of what I do, but the largest part is speaking and writing. And you can see some of the other podcasts I've been on and just really get an idea of who I am and what I'm about.
There's a lot of data, and there's your book, and the book is on the website. I'm sure people can find it on other places like Amazon.
Yeah.
So, ending up, what piece of advice or what thought would you like to leave people with who really want to move forward in being an empathetic leader?
It really goes back to keeping in mind that there is more than one kind of empathy. And for leaders in particular, understanding that distinction between emotional empathy and cognitive empathy. So, if I want to put that in a nutshell, I would remind everybody to always lead with a cool head and a warm heart.
A cool head and a warm heart. I love your command of the language and the specificity of how you use it. So, Melissa, thank you for joining us today on the Nonprofit Exchange and sharing so many useful insights about empathy and leadership to our audience. You can learn more about her work, her resources, and her services. And it's the website will be on the page, but it's EQ via, you get there via EQ via empathy, empathy.com. You can find this episode on thenonprofitexchange.org. And it's been lovely having you as an audience. And Melissa, thank you for the inspiration and the wisdom that you shared with us today on the Nonprofit Exchange.
It's been my pleasure. This was fantastic, and thank you and your audience so much for having me.
Thank you for watching The Nonprofit Exchange.